How is it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Hip Drop Podcast. Lucas and I are back after a little longer hiatus than usual. We did not go yesterday, so we're going on a Sunday night. And boy, howdy, to not copy Tucker Franklin. I just kind of copyrighted him there. But anyways, we have a lot to talk about because it was an eventful free agency across the NFL. It was an eventful free agency for the Chiefs. They finally have a running back. They might have two running backs. You know, they filled a need at safety. I think that a pretty good free agency. They still have some holes in the roster. You could use a receiver. They can use an edge rusher, but they did do a pretty good job in this first wave of free agency. We have a lot to discuss. The Maxx Crosby situation, some teams getting their quarterback situations solidified going into the season. But before we get into that, Lucas, how you doing on this cold Sunday night?
Kind of an interesting weekend. Minnesota got its heaviest snowfall of the entire winter season. It was at the very end, so stuck in my house the past 36 hours. But other than that, I'm doing pretty well.
Good. And yeah, so here in Nebraska yesterday, it was 60 degrees. I was in shorts yesterday, and we had like the snowstorm state. It's insane. That's weather in Nebraska for you. That's the Midwest in a nutshell. It's going to be 80 on Friday, so that tells you everything you need to know. But we're not here to talk about the weather. This is not a weather podcast. This is an NFL podcast, and a lot happened in the NFL this past week. And we'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Lucas, no more Isaiah Pacheco running into Creed Humphrey's ass. No more Kareem Hunt needing 3 and getting 3, but needing 4 and getting 3. The Chiefs finally have a real running back. You could argue they have a top 10 running back on the team for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career. Kenneth Walker, the reigning Super Bowl MVP, is now a Kansas City Chief. He signed a 3-year contract within 15 minutes of the legal tampering period opening. So the Chiefs finally have a legitimate running game. Mahomes has never had an 1,000-yard rusher. Maybe he would have had one in Kareem Hunt in his first year as a starter with Kareem Hunt, who ultimately didn't end up finishing the season. But Kenneth Walker, by a wide margin, significant margin, not even close, is the best running back Patrick Mahomes has ever had. An 1,000-yard rusher, 2 of his 4 years in Seattle, despite splitting carries with Zach Charbonnet. And he is now a Kansas City Chief. So, Lucas, what are your thoughts on this? And how will it help the Chiefs offense get back to baseline competency running the football, which we have not seen in a few years?
Yeah, this is a signing they needed to make. I think when it comes to actually building a team in the offseason, you can only plan for what you have control for in the immediate future. And we all know the Chiefs needed to upgrade at running back at any way possible this offseason. In the end, it didn't matter how they did it. They could have done nothing in free agency, drafted Jeremiah Love at 9, and everyone would have been very happy except for me, who would not like a running back at 9, but nonetheless, the running back position would have been improved. But the Chiefs are not going to take their chances in the draft when it came to this position. And they signed the best running back on the market, and that's Kenneth Walker. Not a perfect player, but the Chiefs had to do this. The running back position was not arguably, it was their worst performing on-field position last year. Maybe not as bad as the coaching staff or some members of the coaching staff. Worst position, and particularly, it wasn't necessarily that Kareem Hunt was a net negative every time he was on the field. He was useful in short yardage situations. Like if they needed 2 yards, Kareem Hunt would get like 2.25 yards. But if it was anything more than that, good luck. I mean, if there was a hole, he would maybe only get like 8 yards, in which most other running backs, even league average ones or slightly below average ones, would have gotten like 15. And that's what the Chiefs are going to get with Kenneth Walker. They're not going to get a 2024 Saquon Barkley, not going to get a 2023 Christian McCaffrey. They're going to get a running back who is going to make those 8-yard gains into 15-yard gains, and maybe once out of every 4 games is going to break off like a 30, 40, 50-yard run, which Kareem Hunt would. I don't think Kareem Hunt had I think he only had like one run longer than 30 yards his entire time in the second sit in Kansas City. And I think it was that Jacksonville Monday night game where he randomly broke off that explosive run, which he never did previously. And we're not going to have Isaiah Pacheco, who the first 2 years of his career, or 2 in 1 game years of his career, he was an excellent back for what he was, not an excellent back overall. Provided some explosive, a little bit of power, but again, not an overly explosive player like what you would want in a Kansas City offense. That's going to be fireworks. But yeah, Kenneth Walker, I think he's a borderline top 10 back, if not like the ninth best running back in the NFL. The Chiefs are not a run heavy team, so it's not like he's going to be putting up 2,000 rushing yards, maybe not even 2,000 all purpose yards. But when they do run the ball, he's going to give them something they haven't had in, I would say, since 2018 Kareem Hunt. Like maybe Damian Williams, you could argue, was a really, really good back, but I don't think Damian Williams is anything special despite his Super Bowl performance.
No.
But Kenneth Walker just gives them competency. Like the running back was their worst position last year, and now they're above average at it. They still need to maybe get another RB2 behind him, whether that is bringing back Kareem Hunt or drafting another power back to pair with Walker in like the 4th or 5th round. But nonetheless, the Chiefs knew their worst position coming into the season or the offseason was running back, and they got the best one on the free agent market.
Right. And we'll get to Travis Etienne here shortly, who signed with the New Orleans Saints. But yeah, I mean, they also brought in Amari DiMarcado from Arizona, kind of a speed back, a home run hitter, kind of infamous for dropping that ball against the Titans at the goal line. But he's another change of pace type player who does have some explosiveness, but Walker's the big one here. I mean, Kenneth Walker is, like I said, one of the better running backs in football. He is a home run hitter. He is a guy, anytime he touches the football, he has the ability to run 40 yards for a touchdown. He is that level of player. And like I said, is he Bijan Robinson or, 2024, pre-2025 Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry? No, not quite. He's not quite that level of player, but he is a damn good back. And what Patrick Mahomes really needs as he gets older, as his mobility will start to decline, especially coming off a torn ACL, I think he'll need a little bit of a running game to support him a little bit, which other elite quarterbacks had. Josh Allen had James Cook, or has James Cook, I should say. Lamar Jackson has Derrick Henry. Matthew Stafford has Kyron Williams. Patrick Mahomes has never really had that level of running back since 12 games of Kareem Hunt in his first year as a starter. Kenneth Walker brings that type of juice to the backfield. So a Super Bowl MVP, handing the ball off to a Super Bowl MVP, should be a lot of fun to watch. The Chiefs running the football will be fun to watch for the first time in quite a while. So good move by Brett Veach, good proactive move to upgrade that position. We're going to go to another AFC team, notable AFC team, the Baltimore Ravens, because last time we met, I think it was the day after Maxx Crosby had been, or so we thought had been, traded to the Ravens for two first round picks. And we discussed like how this impacts the Ravens ceiling, whether Crosby was worth that haul. Well, we found out on Tuesday night that Maxx Crosby, it turns out, will not be a Baltimore Raven. The Ravens, just before hold on a second. My cat's being really distracting. Jojo, stop it.
Shout out to Owen's cat for making this episode even more entertaining. But
yes,
yeah,
he has the ability to do that. But as I was saying, so it was Tuesday night. It was mere hours before official free agency, opened and official contracts could be finalized and trades were finalized and what have you. The Ravens backed out of it, and the reasoning that they provided was that Maxx Crosby failed his physical because he did have knee surgery. He did miss the back half, not the back half, but the down the stretch. He did not play for the Raiders last year because of his knee. And while that's a reasonable explanation, I do think the Ravens were a team that was absolutely pillaged in free agency. They lose their center, Tyler Linderbaum. They lose one of their two tight ends, and Isaiah Likely. They lose their fullback in Patrick Ricard, who was so instrumental to their running game. They lose their safety in Alohi Gilman. They lose Draymond Jones, who's a pretty good edge rusher, to New England. Kyle Van Noy hasn't been signed anywhere else, but probably is not coming back. They lost a lot. They lost their punter, for whatever that's worth, Jordan Stout. They lost a lot of talent from that team. And I think Eric DeCosta saw, man, we are losing some legitimate players, and we just traded 2 first-round picks for a 29-year-old edge rusher who is still very good, who has still been very good in recent years, but like you said last time, has not quite been that superstar, high-end, best edge rusher in football level really since 2023, and he's coming off an injury. So I think he got cold feet, and they saw Trey Hendrickson was still out there, and the very next morning, lo and behold, Trey Hendrickson stays in the AFC North. He is a Baltimore Raven, despite being 3 years older than Maxx Crosby is, and also coming off a season where he was injured for the large majority of. Very, very wild. I have never seen anything like this happen. So Maxx Crosby, as of now, looks like will still be on the Raiders, who made a lot of moves to improve their team in free agency. They were very aggressive. And the Ravens, while they keep their picks, they don't get that game-breaking player that they thought they were getting in Crosby. They get Hendrickson, who, like I said, is older and also coming off an injury-riddled season.
Yeah, this was if you guys remember the last time we were on here, I eviscerated Baltimore for this trade because I still firmly believe Maxx Crosby was not worth what they gave up, which is the equivalent of a top 10 pick. I thought that package was ridiculous. And I think Eric DeCosta, for one reason or another, either he sobered up and realized 2 first-round picks for a guy who has not been an all-pro level player in 2 years and might never be one again. Probably not a very good business move, especially when your roster is kind of going through a retool process. Not exactly the smartest football decision. Or I think you were right in the sense that, like, the Ravens roster got really, really ravaged and raided, and they could probably use these 2 first-round picks to find cheap talent, and then use the additional cap space to find a player who's maybe has less question marks than Trey Hendrickson, even though he's a little bit older. But kind of a weird process. We've heard a lot of conflicting reports after this came out. Some people said it was just the physical. There are other people who are theorizing that Eric DeCosta just didn't want to do this trade anymore. And I just think he just didn't want to do it anymore because that's the simplest explanation. Everyone knew Maxx Crosby had a knee injury after this past season. Like, that wasn't a secret at all. Like, it wasn't like it was the Raiders were just keeping it hidden from everyone, not putting it on the injury report. Everyone knew he was hurt. So the Ravens agreed to that trade initially, knowing that his knee was not 100%. So maybe it's possible his knee is just barbecue chicken and it's not just hurt. It's like, it might be done. That's possible. Right. Or they realized, you know what? We're not really in a position right now to trade the 14th overall pick plus maybe the 25th overall pick in a very, very, very good draft next year for a 29-year-old pass rusher, which we might get 1 elite season left, if that, if not a couple very good ones. Not the smartest thing to do. I said the Bears I would have liked that package for the Bears, not the Ravens. And I think Eric DeCosta realized it's probably for the best, because if you think about it, they just traded Maxx Crosby for Trey Hendrickson and 2 first-round picks. Right. But I'd rather have Trey Hendrickson and 2 first-round picks. I think Trey Hendrickson's the better football player. I got into a bit of an argument last week about that, but I think it's objectively true. Trey Hendrickson is a better football player in 2026 than Maxx Crosby.
He's had a more recent great season. Trey Hendrickson led the league in sacks in 2024 with 17. Last year was a weird year. He didn't play much, but I get that argument from that standpoint.
I still think he was better, but nonetheless, that's not the point. We're not here to argue about Trey Hendrickson versus Maxx Crosby of all people, but I think this is a blessing in disguise for the Ravens. I think the biggest question is how many GMs, if any, look at Eric DeCosta and be like, dude, you backed out of this trade not because you actually had concerns about his knee and you just changed your mind. And will that cause teams to not want to do business with them? Will it cause, I don't know who Maxx Crosby's agent is, but will it cause the agent that represents Maxx Crosby to not want to do business with the Ravens for his other clients? Because I know for a fact, and you and I both know, NFL teams absolutely do business with and not do business with certain agents or because of agents. I think Matt Verdon was telling us a story. There are teams who edit their draft boards because certain players are represented by certain agents. And will that work in reverse? I don't know if it's Drew Rosenhaus. Let's just say Drew Rosenhaus is his agent, whoever it is.
Let me look it up real quick. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but if Maxx Crosby's agent's okay, I represent these 3 other players, we are not going to
CJ LeBoy. CJ LeBoy is Max's agent.
CJ LeBoy. If CJ LeBoy's other clients are free agents, he's not going to be. I don't think any of his clients are going to be going to the Baltimore Ravens. And if CJ LeBoy is representing draft prospects, I don't think he's going to allow his players to accept visits or interviews with the Ravens going forward. Is that going to be a thing? Maybe it's not. Maybe CJ's I get it. It's business. You didn't think it was the best thing to do for your team. But that's what I think the fallout's going to be. I think on the field, this is a blessing in disguise for the Ravens, but will it have ramifications outside of just the players involved, and that's what we're gonna have to find out shortly.
And I think that the thing that a lot of people are missing here, the Ravens were 8-9 last year. They were not good, and their defense was not good, and really just they had a lot of issues last season. And I feel like a lot of players who were good players and had been key contributors to them at certain points are now gone, and they're like, man, we were an 8-9 football team. Most of our team, not most, but like a decent portion of our team left in free agency, and we have no first round picks each of the last 2 years. If Maxx Crosby is the player that he was in 2024 and last season, this could be a train wreck because we're still a mediocre team and we have no first round picks. Whereas we signed Trey Hendrickson, who is a similar caliber player. Lucas thinks he's better. I think it's close. Who, yes, he is older, but has had a more recent high end year while keeping those picks. It puts us maybe in a better position moving forward. So I do think the Ravens, in terms of like how they handled it, like getting cold feet, I understand why people are going after them and they're getting criticism in that regard. But I also think in terms of like the on-field product, if they hit on these picks, now if they draft poorly with these picks, it doesn't matter. But if they hit on the picks and Hendrickson, at least gives you like 2 years of double-digit sacks or and a good amount of pressures, it could work out well. It could work out well. So we'll see what happens. But that was wild. I was shocked when I saw that, and I think the way the Raiders worded it was pretty funny. It was basically they worded it professionally, but it was basically like, fuck the Ravens. They backed out of this trade. That's the way I read it. So the Raiders aren't happy. But that's football. That's business. And a lot of people think it was bad business by the Ravens, but it was. I think they kind of got a last minute save if Crosby is just not the player he once was.
Yeah,
All
and I
right.
think just to continue on just a little bit, will this event kind of serve as like a catalyst to change how the NFL does business moving forward? And there's not a legal tampering period, and like everything opens for business at one specific hour. There's no tampering period whatsoever. And I know it doesn't really trades aren't really in the same category as free agent signings because teams can theoretically agree to trades whenever they want. They just can't process the paperwork. If you remember, Alex Smith was traded like late January of 2018. He was traded to Washington. So, but will this kind of change? Like, oh, there's like this theoretical like window that we can agree to signings with certain teams, and our players can agree to signings with certain teams, and vice versa. They're like, oh, we technically agree, but there's like this dead period or waiting period for 1, 2, 3 days, and like now people are going to be more paranoid of, holy crap, like, yeah, we agree to these deals, but the team can just back out at any moment. It's like, nope, we don't want to do this anymore. And then all of a sudden they don't have a market where they get that same contract. So will this kind of just change things where like everything opens for business? There's no tampering period. Everything opens for business immediately. And so players can sign the contracts immediately. Teams can sign the contracts immediately. And there's no like waiting period. I know it's a trade, so it's not exactly like free agency, but will this cause the NFL to change how they change the calendar? And I don't know whether this requires something to be done in the CBA, where, because I know the CBA has more to do with like money than it does the actual like on-field product. But I don't know if that's something the NFL will do next year. We're like, okay, there's no legal tampering period. Everything just opens for business once the new league year begins on like March 13th, 2027 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that could be the case. Because if there was no legal tampering period, this never would have happened. Maxx Crosby wouldn't have been able to be traded until Wednesday, the new league year. And I think Eric DeCosta would have maybe like realized like, hey, maybe this isn't the best move, because it's kind of mortgaging our future for a 29-year-old edge rusher. But maybe this could be a change in changing the process moving forward and getting rid of the legal tampering period, because people have, I think somewhat justifiably spoken out against the legal tampering period and saying it's basically bullshit. Because literally like within minutes of free agency, teams are announcing deals. It's like free agency does not start on Wednesday. It technically starts long before then. I mean, like I said, Kenneth Walker was announced to the Chiefs with literally like 15 minutes until the legal tampering period opening. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see how this has any effect moving forward. All right, Lucas, here's another very, very surprising outcome. Something that I did not see happening. Mike Evans, the longtime Tampa Bay Buccaneer, has been with the team since 2014. No longer with the Buccaneers. He signs a 3-year contract worth up to $60.4 million with the San Francisco 49ers. So he moves out west. Mike Evans, of course, notoriously the 1,000-yard streak, basically had 1,000 yards every season of his career prior to last year, where he missed a good portion of the year with the injury. He goes to the Bay Area with Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, and all them to the 49ers team that desperately needed some receiver help. I mean, they were trotting out pretty basically nonsense at receiver down the stretch, whether it's Chiefs legend Demarcus Robinson or, Jawan Jennings is a decent player, but not a great player. Ricky Pearsall, not a lot. They didn't have a ton of receivers. It was a need that they had. So Mike Evans comes in there. He's an older player, but he's still a good receiver when he's healthy. Lucas, how shocked were you that Mike Evans did not finish his career with the Buccaneers? And what do you think this move does for the 49ers?
I was a little surprised in the moment, but I think after doing research and listening to some people who have some I'm not saying connections to the Bucks, but they're Bucks fans and they follow the Bucks. It sounds like Mike Evans and Todd Bowles did not see eye to eye, and I think his decision to not sign a contract with the team was made, I think, once they retained Todd Bowles, and not necessarily that I thought the head coach Todd Bowles is more important than Mike Evans, but I think you should have sided with Mike Evans in that situation because I think they should have fired Todd Bowles. They should have moved on, and that's ramification and sucks for Tampa Bay sports. They lost Steven Stamkos, who was the best player in their franchise history, and perhaps they lost Mike Evans, who's maybe not the Bucks GOAT, but he's up there in the span of less than 2 years. But yeah, I don't think this is the worst thing to happen for the Buccaneers. I mean, obviously emotionally they have the emotional connections to Mike Evans, but on the field, they had Emeka Ibuka, they have Jalen McMillan, who are projected to be solid wide receivers going forward. They re-signed Chris Godwin last offseason, and are you really going to sign a multi-year extension with Mike Evans? They had too many cooks in the kitchen, so they had to free up some roster space and may hopefully use their cap space for other areas of the roster that could use improvement, and not necessarily a wide receiver who's going to be one of the 4 main ones. So, but it sucks. Bucs fans were very attached to Mike Evans. Ask any Buccaneers fan, I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I do not agree with that statement, but we're not going to argue that Mike Evans' Hall of Fame case. But yeah, and for the 49ers, they needed to do this. I think there's a chance this move just goes completely bust because he is 33 years old. And I think he's going to be, I think he's 33 because I think he was a 21-year-old rookie in 2014. So nonetheless, he's 33 right now.
He's 32. He turns 33 before the season.
Okay, yeah. So that was okay. I was looking over the cap. I mean, there's a chance this move goes completely bust. Just go you have a 12, the dealer has a 9, you hit and you get a 10 and it's over. He's going to be 33 in week 1. That's not exactly young. Hopefully, Mike Evans is not a guy who relies on his short speed, his agility, his quickness. So maybe he just ages a lot better than other wide receivers, but I don't think this is a deal that's a home run for the 49ers. I think in year 1, it's going to be a strong upgrade. I think they're still betting a lot on Ricky Pearsall because Jawan Jennings is still on the open market. They still have George Kittle to hold down the tight end fort. Christian McCaffrey, they hope, has 1 or 2 more elite years left. So as long as those guys are still humming and Ricky Pearsall finally takes a step forward, then it puts a lot less pressure on this move. But I think there's a lot of risk to this move just because he's going to be 33. I don't really know if he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver again, but he seems to do it every year he's healthy.
Yeah, and look, it was not a small contract. It was a 3-year deal, which basically means it's a 2-year deal in reality. $60 million for a 32-year-old receiver is not insignificant. Mike Evans last season played in just 8 games. It was by far the most injury-riddled season of his career, and he's going to the 49ers, a team that's been the most injury-prone team basically over the last 5 years. It seems like seemingly almost every year they have significant injuries. They have guys who have season-ending injuries. God knows they had a million of those last year. Really reared its head in that divisional round game against the Seahawks. Mike Evans, in his 8 games last year, had 30 catches, for 368 yards and 3 touchdowns. So 9 games missed, so he missed more games than he played in. And like I said, it was the first season of his career where he did not get to 1,000 yards. And look, I get his frustration because I think the Buccaneers probably should have fired Todd Bowles after last year. I mean, they completely collapsed down the stretch. They were 6-2, and they finished 8-9, which is just unfathomably bad. Their only wins down the stretch were against the Cardinals at home and against the Panthers in Week 18. So it was a team that just completely fell apart in every which way imaginable. And so I understand why he didn't believe in their vision moving forward. But yeah, it's a bit of a risk by the Niners. But for Tampa, I get it from the sense where, yeah, like you have enough receivers, and if he doesn't want to be there, he doesn't want to be there. So Mike Evans will be a San Francisco 49er for the next handful of years. We'll see how that goes. All right. First quarterback, most notable quarterback move thus far. Lucas, this is relevant to you because it's the team, it's where you live. The Minnesota Vikings have a starting quarterback for 2026. They rightfully understood the JJ McCarthy experiment, probably a fail. So they signed Kyler Murray to a 1-year contract. Kyler was officially released by the Cardinals, was, announced to be released by the Cardinals on Tuesday, March 4th, was officially released at the start of the new league year. Thursday evening, he signed a 1-year deal with Minnesota. I know some of the reporters were saying, oh, it's going to be a quarterback competition between him and JJ McCarthy. No, it's not. Kyler Murray will be the Vikings starting quarterback in 2026. And we'll see if how it goes beyond that. Because like I said, it's a 1-year kind of a prove-it deal, similar to what Sam Darnold signed in 2024. And of course, the Vikings would love to get, that kind of production, a 14-win season, Murray putting up the numbers that, or at least close to the numbers that Darnold did that year. So Kyler, I think it's a much needed change of scenery. He's with a smart offensive coach into Kevin O'Connell. He's throwing to one of the best receivers in the league in Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison's a very good number 2 receiver. So it's a pretty good offensive environment, pretty solid offensive infrastructure. And a team that is talented. I mean, the Vikings last year won 9 games. People forget they won 9 games. They won their last 5 games with, I would say, the worst quarterback play in the league. So it shows like the depth of their roster is very good. And while, whether you can argue how good Kyler Murray is, I personally don't think he's anything great. He does give you a much higher ceiling and a much higher floor than what the law office of JJ McCarthy, Carson Wentz, and Max Brosmer gave them last year. So it's an upgrade for the Vikings, the most important position, and they're seeing like if they can get back to the playoffs. And a season where people within their leadership have some pressure under them to win games next year. They see if they can get back to the playoffs and they can win a playoff game for the first time since 2019. So Lucas, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the Vikings' new quarterback and how that can help them in 2026?
Yeah, this is a move they had to make. I think, like you said, I don't have a lot to add that you didn't already. Like they went 9-8 last year. Granted, they won some kind of fake games down the stretch, but they did eliminate the Lions from the playoffs unofficially on Christmas Day during that whiteout. But the Vikings were a team that lost multiple games last year solely because they were either quarterbacked by Max Brosmer, Carson Wentz, or JJ McCarthy, and the Vikings were not going to let that happen again. I still have some hope for him moving forward. Maybe this proves like the Vikings are like done with him, like they're emotionally moving on. He's still going to be on the roster, but they're no longer going to be betting on him. Kind of like this kind of reminds me of very similarly to like Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets, where they had a second-year quarterback who they've had on the roster for 2 years at that point, but then all of a sudden, like they were like, we're not going to do this, and they acquired a veteran. They signed a veteran in free agency. I don't know. I forgot if Aaron Rodgers signed or was traded. He was traded.
He was traded. Yeah, he was traded very late in the offseason. It wasn't until like May or something like that.
Exactly. But like, nonetheless, they brought in a veteran. We'll see how that worked. We didn't get to see how that worked out in 2023 for the Jets, but I think the Vikings, it's going to be very boom or bust. Like, we'll see. I still have hope that Kyler could be maybe not an elite quarterback, but like maybe like the 12th best quarterback in football that is capable on maybe like 2 games a year, giving you like MVP caliber play. And that's what the Vikings are looking for because they shall up the defense. build up the offensive line, hopefully get a long-term running back that's not Aaron Jones or
Yeah.
Jordan Mason, and then just and is not relying on Kyler to be elite for the offense to be functional. And the Vikings defense with Brian Flores is they are ones they're a unit that creates chaos. Like they're
Yeah.
not necessarily one that's going to hold teams to 15 points a game, 250 yards of offense every single week, but they're ones that they're going to be top 5 in takeaways most likely. And so that gives Kyler Murray some slack with being careless with the football a little bit or just not having those on days. But as long as he's a clear upgrade over JJ McCarthy, that's all the Vikings could really ask for. Even if that means he's like the 20th best quarterback in football, JJ was like the 40th best quarterback. So not a lot of pressure on Kyler. I forgot the terms of his contract, but it wasn't anything.
It was very small. It was not a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. So like if he's awful, I don't think people are really going to care. He grew up a Vikings fan for some reason. So he said he cried when Brett Favre threw that game, or that not game losing, but the interception that screwed up the 2009 NFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that means he's going to actually work hard and not be playing Call of Duty in the middle of the season. But yeah, so I have a lot of hope. I think it's going to make the Vikings more exciting because bare minimum, whether you like it or not, Kyler Murray is a more exciting player than JJ McCarthy. Like I think we could all agree on that.
For sure.
So and Kevin O'Connell runs a somewhat exciting offense. You have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and then the running game could be pretty exciting, even though it's not the most talented. But we'll see what this entails. I'm excited to watch Vikings football, but whether they can get 2021 Kyler Murray back remains to be seen, and you will see in September.
Right. And like I said, somewhat similar to the Darnold signing, although Kyler at this point has a more proven track record than Darnold did at that point in 2024, because he'd been a backup for a few years, obviously, busted with the Jets. People forget Kyler Murray did not play a lot last year. He played just 5 games. The Cardinals went 2 and 3 of those games. He threw for 962 yards. He threw 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 88.6 quarterback rating. He ran for a touchdown. He completed 68% of his throws. So, decent numbers, not great, which has pretty much been his MO most of his career outside of that 7-0 start in 2021. But the Vikings need to do something, because if McCarthy didn't improve, it would be another situation where they go nowhere and the coaching staff likely gets fired. Their general manager already got fired, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, in late January. So, look, I think Kyler was the best available quarterback, and they got him on the roster. Most proven available quarterback, best available quarterback. And the Vikings look like a team that's trying to go for it next year. Because if they rolled it back with McCarthy, it just wouldn't be the case. So, look, they were aggressive. They got him for a good deal, and we'll see if Kyler can kind of reinvigorate his career, which is kind of trending downwards the last year and a half or so. Alrighty. There were some contracts, Lucas, that were given out on Monday that you and I discussed that were not small for what it's worth, rather large, so maybe a little bit too large. And I think there's 2 that stood out to me that were handed out within the first hour of the legal tampering period that I saw and looked at. I was like, whoa, that is a lot of money. The first one is Jalen Phillips signing with the Carolina Panthers. Jalen Phillips had the largest contract of any player that was signed in free agency. Jalen Phillips, who is going to be 27, sorry, I misread that, 27 in about 2 months, signed a 4-year, $120 million contract with $80 million guaranteed with the Panthers. And wow, that's a lot. That is a lot for Jalen Phillips, who has never had a double-digit sack season, has really struggled with injuries throughout his career. He's had 2 significant lower body injuries. He tore his Achilles on the MetLife turf in 2023. He had another lower body injury, I believe, in 2022. His career high in sacks is 8.5. That was his rookie year in 2021. He spent most of his career in Miami. Last year, he was traded at the deadline to the Eagles. Played pretty well for Philadelphia, but he is a good edge rusher. He's a good player. He's a solid run defender. He is not worth 4 years, $120 million. And Carolina is a team that looks to be on the come up. They made the playoffs last year. They won the division. They're trying to take that next step from a plucky underdog to a real viable threat. And look, Jalen Phillips makes them better. He is an upgrade over what they had in their edge room in 2025, but that's insane money for a guy who really hasn't had elite production at any point in his career. Like I said, in terms of sacks, he peaked as a rookie. So I I think it's a big risk, and I think if it doesn't go well, Carolina could be looking pretty silly for this one.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. When I first saw this contract, I was mostly with you, or like I would say I was not mostly, I was completely with you in spirit. But I think after looking at it again, I don't like it. I'm not endorsing it by any means, but I could somewhat see the vision with what Carolina's doing. You could make a serious argument after quarterback. The most coveted position type is pass rusher. And maybe if it's not the second most, it's maybe third after left tackle. So if you want to get one in free agency, you're going to have to pay. That's the trade-off. Like, you either have to draft them really well, or you have to trade for them. Or you have to trade for them, which you have to give up a lot in capital, and you have to pay them, or draft capital that is not just regular capital. Or you got to sign these big contracts. And I think people need to realize, like, it's free agency, it's open season. So you're competing against a bunch of other teams, which drives up the price. So you're going to have to kind of accept that. But I think, just talk about X's and O's and not just talking in a circle. I think Jalen Phillips is a guy who's struggled with injuries. He played roughly 510 snaps between 2023 and 2024. So the Panthers got to bet he's going to stay healthy, or else it's definitely not going to be worth it. But he has shown in the past that he could be an elite pass rusher. I understand in 2022 he didn't have a high sack total, but the quality was there. He had a high pass rush win rate. He was very, very, very productive. Just couldn't get the sacks in. He had a 90.1 PFF pass rushing grade, and then I forgot it was an ACL injury, or you said it. He had a significant lower body injury, and just hasn't been the same guy since. So maybe the Panthers are betting, okay, another solid offseason in our program. Put him in its defensive system, which they're building out like pretty well. Like, the Dolphins had nobody last year in Miami, and when he went to Philadelphia, he was pretty solid as a pass rusher, not elite, but pretty good. The Panthers are saying, we're just going to build our front seven. They have Derek Brown. They signed Trayvon Wharton to that huge contract for some reason. They have Nick Scorton. They actually have Mike Jackson and J.C. Horn at corner, which is maybe the most underrated 1-2 cornerback duo in the NFL. So maybe they're just betting, like, we're paying a lot for him, but we are going to bet that he's going to be a lot better in our system than he was in Miami's system for the past couple of years. Because it looked like he was developing to be a Pro Bowl type of guy until he suffered that major injury. And the Panthers are betting, like, we can get that out of him now that he's like 2 or 3 years removed from that injury. It's a big risk. This could go belly up very easily. So I know you were kind of slightly negative towards it, so I'm going slightly more positive just to give some difference. But overall, I would probably grade it probably like a C-, to where I don't hate it because I understand the vision. I think if you're going to bet on a pass rusher in free agency, it was going to be Jalen Phillips, because the great pass rushers just don't hit free agency that often. So if you really want to get a special one, you're either just going to have to find a diamond in the rough, you're just going to have to get really lucky with who you signed, or you got to overpay for the number one guy in the market, and that was Jalen Phillips. I think there's a really good opportunity. He develops into a Pro Bowler in Carolina. Do I think that's going to happen? Maybe not, but he has that talent, and he's shown it in the past. Carolina's betting they could be the team that gets it out of him, because if he could develop into a double-digit sack guy, he's worth $30 million. The question is, can he stay healthy, and can he get back to the player he was in 2022?
For sure. And, like, he's still very young. He's younger than a guy that you expect was drafted back in 2021. Like I said, he's still 26, so he'll be 27 next year. Still a young player. But I do think it's Carolina, to me, is kind of banking on potential than what we've actually seen on the field. And like I said, maybe if he did not get hurt in 2023, I remember watching, it was a Black Friday game against the Jets on MetLife turf. He tore his Achilles in that game. He potentially gets double-digit sacks this year. So this whole talking point about him never having double-digit sacks is non-existent. But I think it's a big gamble for the Panthers. Speaking of big gambles, and Lucas, you and I think we texted about this when we share similar opinions, and that was Tyler Linderbaum, the former Ravens center, signs a 3-year, $81 million contract with the Raiders, $27 million AAV, which makes him the highest paid center in NFL history. Wow, that, like I said, that is not small. And look, Tyler Linderbaum is a good center by every objective measure, particularly as a run blocker. He's an objectively very good run blocker. It's a big reason why the Ravens running game has been really good throughout his tenure there. Also, Derrick Henry being in the backfield helps as well, but I digress. But Tyler Linderbaum as a pass blocker, not great, not bad by any means, but not great, not elite as a pass blocker. And I get it from the Raiders standpoint where you're trying to build the best possible offensive infrastructure around your rookie quarterback, because we all presume Fernando Mendoza will be their quarterback. I mean, as of now, it's Aiden O'Connell. We know that's not going to happen. But and the Raiders' offensive line really was the biggest factor in that offense being such a train wreck a year ago. I know everyone looks at Geno Smith and everyone looks at their lack of receiver depth, but the real problem was their offensive line, which was absolutely horrendous. And so I get the Raiders are trying to build up some respectability up front. And look, Linderbaum, like I said, is an objectively good center, and he'll make them better. But that's $27 million a year for a center who is not an elite pass blocker is pretty wild. I mean, that's $7 million more than what Creed Humphrey's making. Creed Humphrey is 10 times the player Linderbaum is. Not to be biased, but just objectively speaking.
Yeah, I similar to Jalen Phillips, I get what the Raiders are doing. I just don't understand how this negotiation went. Like, what could Baltimore possibly have been offering that the Raiders were forced to offer $27 million a year? Like, it's not that $27 million a year in a vacuum is awful value for Tyler Linderbaum, because he's very good. He's not, I don't think he's like the best center of football, but
no.
The problem is the second highest paid player right now at the position is Creed Humphrey at $18 million. That's $9 million more per year. So a lot of people say
nine. Sorry, I got the number wrong. It's $9 million.
Yeah,
it's $9 million.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I'm kind of confused. Like, was Tyler Linderbaum getting offered by Baltimore more than $23 million a year? Like, were the Ravens offering him 4 years, $23 million per year, or did the Raiders like saying, we're going to get the number one offensive lineman in free agency. We're not going to screw around. We're just going to offer whatever it takes. We're going to offer him pretty much a blank check. And that's what he got. And my question is, does this screw up the center market? I mean, does Creed Humphrey go back to the Chiefs either this offseason or next offseason and be like, this dude got $27 million. I'm better than this. I'm better than that guy. Like, give me $5 million more per year. Like, that might screw over the Chiefs. And so I'm also confused. Like, it had to be like, did it have to be $27 million? It could have been like 23. But like, a lot of people, this is not as big of a deal as in the NFL as it is in the NHL. If you ask any NHL fan that lives in Canada or like New York or California, they'll whine about, oh, these warm weather teams like Vegas, Florida, and Tampa, they play no income state tax, no income tax states. Like, that's a big advantage, which it's an advantage, but it's not the end all be all. Could the Raiders not have used that to their advantage like some NHL teams do? Like, they could say, hey, like, once you establish residency in Vegas, every dollar you get, like, from a signing bonus, that's income tax, state income tax free, which is probably going to be like 5% less in Baltimore, because you're not paying that extra 5%, which would have given them an advantage, like maybe $1 million per year. I don't understand, but overall, I'd probably give that move like a C. The Raiders had to upgrade the offensive line, so I'm not going to sit here and like kill them for signing this. And there are a lot of people that believe that like there's no real fundamental difference in the value between guards and centers. It's mainly just a financial one. You could ask any Chiefs fan, like, who's the better football player, Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith? And not only who's better, but who's more important. Everyone would say Creed Humphrey. So I don't think it's ridiculous that if guards are getting like $25 million a year, a center could get 27. I don't think that's the craziest thing in the world, because I really think it's like one position, like interior offensive line should be graded as one position. So I don't hate it from that standpoint, but I'm not really impressed by this move by the Raiders. I think they overpaid, but if Fernando Mendoza has a good offensive line and this leads to Ashton Jeanty having an all-pro season, I think it's going to pay a lot of dividends.
And look, Ashton Jeanty last year was very inefficient as a ball carrier, but I think a lot of that, like I said, can be credited. The Raiders had maybe the worst offensive line in the league last year. And speaking of the Raiders, before we move on to some of our side topics, Like, I actually think they had a pretty good free agency, which is rare to say about the Raiders. The Raiders in the past have been notorious for overspending guys who really aren't that good. But like they're adding real, not great players, but quality football players to their team. N'Kobe Dean, Quay Walker, Tyler Linderbaum, Jalen Naylor, guys who are professionals, guys who are going to help try to rebuild that culture on a team that was the worst in football last year and trying to help build that thing back up to at least competency. So I do understand I do understand why they're spending so much and trying to make that team as presentable as possible. Um, but like I said, $27 for look, Tyler Linderbaum over his career. He has never made a first team or second team all pro. He's made 3 Pro Bowls. He made the Pro Football Writers Association all rookie team. So he's objectively good, but I mean, $27 million a year for a guy who's never made an all pro seems aggressive, but we'll see how it works out for the Raiders. As a Chiefs fan, I hope it works out horribly, but we'll see. For Tyler Linderbaum's case, good for him. I mean, that's life-changing money right there. All right, some of our side topics, Lucas. We'll spend less time on these. We'll start off with another quarterback situation being solidified. That happens in Miami, and I was right about this one. Malik Willis lands with the Miami Dolphins. It is a 3-year contract. Let's see, worth 3 years, $67.5 million deal for Malik Willis in Miami. So he reunites with Jeff Hafley, who's the defensive coordinator in Green Bay. John Eric Sullivan was in the front office in Green Bay. So the Dolphins are basically Packers South at this point. Malik Willis, very, very weird trajectory. I mean, he's a guy who really didn't show much at all with the Titans and his limited opportunities. We remember he started against the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football his rookie year. He was really, really bad in that game. He goes to Green Bay, and whenever he got in the game, when Jordan Love when Jordan Love got hurt, he looked really good. He played well. And I think his best performance was against the Ravens last year, where he was 21 of 24. He made some insane throws. He had 2 rushing touchdowns. They lost the game because Derrick Henry ran wild. But Malik Willis, whenever he got in the game for the Packers, really impressed me. And clearly, impressed, guys who he was in the building with, Jeff Hafley, and who practiced against him for 2 years. John Eric Sullivan, who was in the building with him for 2 years. So they liked him enough to bring him in to be their franchise quarterback as they move off of Tua. Look, I think it's a risk in the sense that Malik Willis is a very, very small sample size. I think going away from Matt LaFleur Hafley's the defensive coach. I don't even know who the Dolphins' offensive play caller is. It's Bobby Slowick, former Texans offensive coordinator, will be their play caller. So Slowick actually had some success with CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud had by far his best season under Slowick's tutelage. So we'll see what Malik Willis can do. But I actually like the move for Miami. This is probably the best they could have done because I feel like having Tua there would have been so awkward given how that thing ended last year. So they eat the cap hit by releasing Tua. He goes to Atlanta. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But Malik Willis joins Packers South with the Dolphins. Lucas, your thoughts?
I get why Miami did it. I just think it's awkward. It's an awkward fit for Malik Willis. Like, yeah, I know they have Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, but just it seems like that roster is going through a rebuild, and I don't know if Malik Willis is I think he's kind of weird. On one hand, Willis is talented enough to where he could emerge as a franchise quarterback, but I don't know if he's talented enough to carry a bad roster to respectability. Like, right. That's the thing. Like, Green Bay had a relatively good infrastructure. We'll see if Bobby Slowick can lock in now that he's in Miami, but I get why Miami did this. Like, from Miami's point of view, this makes perfect sense. They desperately need a quarterback, and there just was not going to be anyone good available in the draft for where they were picking, which is like 11th overall. So I don't blame Miami for doing this. I think the contract they gave, it wasn't ridiculous. Some people ripped it, but like, you're paying a quarterback who's very, very talented on the open market. Like, I don't know what else you expected to do or expected to pay. So I get it. I just think the Dolphins roster is going through a rebuild. Can Malik Willis thrive? And on a team that has maybe 2 good players on the offense in Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, we'll see if like a couple of the other guys emerge. Patrick Paul, I think, is a solid left tackle. But in the end, like, this, if they wanted to have respectability at quarterback and not be Tua, this is something they had to do because I just don't know who else they were going to get unless they wanted to drag Derek Carr out of free agency. We'll
Yeah,
maybe
jeez.
talk about him in a couple months if he unretires. But I I get it from Miami's point of view. Malik Willis, I guess he didn't have any good options. I predicted he would go to Arizona. I
Hmm.
still don't. We can maybe talk about Arizona. I just don't understand what the Cardinals are doing. Like, I think the Cardinals should have absolutely beaten that offer from Miami, and maybe he wanted to be in Florida over Arizona. But I get
Yeah,
why the Dolphins did this. I would argue if I was just going to like argue against myself, I don't think it was a good move because I think they really should be tanking. So they should like it's Jeff Hafley and Eric Purcell, and they're not going to get or not Eric Purcell, he's the Dewey from
John
Malcolm in the Middle.
Eric, John
John
Eric.
Eric John
Yeah.
Eric Sullivan, like Dewey from Malcolm in the Middle. They're like unless it goes absolutely atrocious, they were not going to get fired after 2026.
Right.
Like unless they went 0-17, if they went 3-14, but they looked respectable, like they were fighting hard, kind of like Dan Campbell after his first year. I think there would be a lot of like, okay, we could live with this. So if I'm just arguing against myself, the Dolphins should be like, okay, we need to eat to his dead cap hit significantly this year, still have some dead money next year, tank in 2026, and then get an elite quarterback in 2027. I think they're going to be 2 or 3 very, very good quarterbacks that'll be top 5 picks. Like I think Arch Manning will get better this year, and he will be a top 5 pick next year. I think Dante Moore, with another year of experience, will be worth a top 5 pick. And I think maybe if Lenore Sellers bounces back, he could be a top 5 pick. So
Right.
on one hand, it's not going to hinder Miami because if Malik Willis sucks, like they already have a lot of dead money with Tua, so it's not like Malik
Yeah.
Willis's dead contract is going to like kill them. And actually, with Tua's dead cap hit, even if they do post June 1st cut him, Dolphins are going to have the most expensive quarterback room in the NFL, and you can make an argument it's in the bottom 5. But I know I went very deep on this just because I have a lot of opinions. But from Miami's standpoint, I give it a B minus. Like I think if they wanted to get the best quarterback they possibly could have this offseason, they got their guy. But I just don't know if long term it's going to do more harm than good. Because if this causes them to get the 7th pick instead of like the 2nd pick, like I would argue that's not a good thing unless Malik Willis just proves to be that special that they're okay with picking 7th instead of 2nd. But if he's good enough to where he's a starting caliber quarterback, but he's not elite, he's like maybe a legitimate starter, but nothing special, and he drags them from like 3-14 to 5-12. I don't necessarily think that's good long term because they might look at it like Willis is fine, but like we might rather have Arch Manning, but that's a problem for next offseason.
Oh, absolutely. And like I get Malik Willis probably chose Miami because the familiarity with the head coach, with the GM. Whereas the argument for Arizona was, Mike LaFleur, the brother of his former head coach. Well, he never worked with Mike LaFleur, so I do think Miami's a good place to live, is attractive in that regard. And look, it's real money for a guy who has attempted less than 100 passes in the NFL. So Malik Willis still an unknown. Not quite the same infrastructure, but we'll see how that goes. All right, Lucas, back to the Chiefs. Chiefs' old friend, Jalen Watson, is now an old friend because he is no longer with them. He signs let's see if I can pull up the number here. There it is. He signs a 3-year, $51 million deal, $17 million per year with the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams basically pillaged the Chiefs' cornerback room. Jalen Watson was a very good corner in his 4 years throughout Kansas City. And he stays with Trent McDuffie as the Rams desperately needed to overhaul that corner room, which really, really struggled down the stretch of last season, particularly in the NFC Championship game. Jalen Watson lands in LA for a team that really tried to make one last run at it with Stafford and McVay, Devontae Adams, and they're really shoring up that secondary. So, Lucas, how will you remember Jalen Watson's time in Kansas City, and what do you think this does for the Rams?
I am going to remember like out of this would be a good exercise that we would do like in the dead of the offseason.
Yeah.
But you can make a serious argument that Jalen Watson was the best value pick that Brett Veach has had in Kansas City. Like
Right.
maybe I'm forgetting
7th round
someone
pick.
obvious, but he's up there. Like, and he wasn't just good for a 7th round pick. Like Isaiah Pacheco was a good pick for a 7th round pick, but if Pacheco was picked in the 3rd round, we'd be like, eh.
Right.
Jalen Watson was
sure.
a 2nd round. If Jalen Watson was picked in the second round, like 50th overall, we'd be like, that was a good pick. And they got him in the 7th round. And would I have paid that contract that the Rams gave him? 3 years, $51 million. I don't know if I would have paid him that because the Chiefs have shown a tendency to develop cornerbacks. I think if it was 3 by 45, I would have paid it, but I think 3 years, 45 million. I think 3 years, 51 is a little bit too expensive to where the Chiefs roster is. So I get it from that standpoint. I think Jalen Watson for his service, he had that interception to seal the Jaguars game in the game where Mahomes hurt his ankle against the Jaguars.
Yeah, in the divisional round. Yeah, that's right.
Round. So that was a pretty cool pick too.
Special teams play, but he recovered the muff punt in Super Bowl 58 against San Francisco.
He did. Yes, I forgot about
their first touchdown. So look, he was a really good player, really good corner. Was a 2-year starter there because he was behind Snead his first couple years. He was still kind of a rotational player. He still played a lot on defense his first 2 seasons, but 2024, 2025, the full-time starting corner, played in 3 Super Bowls, 2-time Super Bowl champion. I think really burst out of that scene with that pick 6 against Justin Herbert in his second career game, 99-yard pick 6 on Thursday Night Football. So look, Jalen Watson, I get from the value standpoint, 7th round pick, developing into a real legitimately good NFL cornerback is pretty incredible. Jalen Watson has a great story. He's a guy who was working at Foot Locker before he went to the NFL, is a late round pick by the Chiefs, and turns into a really, really instrumental player in their dynasty. So kudos to Jalen Watson. Best of luck to him and Trent McDuffie with the Rams. And the Chiefs will look to kind of rebuild that corner room as they lose their 2 stalwarts there. Speaking of the Chiefs secondary, they made a swap. They basically swapped Brian Cook for Alohi Gilman at the safety position. Look, Brian Cook, I liked Brian Cook. I would not have paid Brian Cook $13 million. He goes to the Bengals. He played his college football in Cincinnati, so it's a move that makes sense in that regard. The Bengals desperately trying to improve their defense. So I think Brian Cook is well part of that 2022 draft class that really, that draft class that Jalen Watson was also in, Trent McDuffie, also a member of that class. The first three years of their career, they never missed the Super Bowl prior to last season. So it's a group of guys that saw a lot of winning. But Brian Cook walks out the door, and then they replace him with Alohi Gilman, who longtime division rival with the Chargers, spent the back half of last year with the Ravens. A good, technically sound football player, not an elite safety by any means, but I don't think he's a downgrade from Brian Cook in any regard. I think I'd even argue he's a slight upgrade. So I like this move from the Chiefs, swapping Cook for Gilman. What say you?
Yeah, I like this move, especially given the contract. I mean, even if you want to argue Brian Cook's better, that's perfectly within one's right. There's no question.
Minuscule. Yeah.
Exactly. There's no question that Alohi Gilman's a better player on his current contract than Brian Cook was on the one he got from the Bengals. And
right.
So from that standpoint, I like it. Gilman, to be honest, I'm going to toot my own horn. Every offseason, I do a mock offseason article where I just kind of do a mock draft, but for the entire offseason, and I project signings, re-signings. Unfortunately, I did predict the Chiefs letting Mike Caliendo not be tendered and then also re-signing him on a new contract. So
we won't talk about that.
Unfortunately, I called that, but I also had them signing Alohi Gilman. And a lot of Chiefs fans might be like, I never heard of him. He hasn't made a Pro Bowl. He's been a really, really good safety the past 3 years. Not like a Pro Bowler, not elite, but the safety is also not one of those positions where you need a Pro Bowl. You just need to be good enough. And that's what Alohi Gilman is. I think that the Chiefs paid him a very fair contract. I think it was 3 years, $25 million. It was not anything ridiculous. And he had a really, really strong underlying numbers in 2023 with the Chargers. He had an 86.1 overall PFF grade, 89.1 coverage. Very strong. He's not the biggest ball hawk, only 5 picks in 6 seasons, but he was above average last year in Baltimore and Los Angeles. The Chargers traded him for Odafe Owe, who ended up getting a $100 million contract. Was it $100 million? It was like $80 million or something.
It was $100 million from Washington. Yeah, which I thought was insane.
Okay, it was.
I like Odafe Owe.
It was 100. Yeah. And so that clearly shows how much the Chargers valued Odafe Owe and how much the Ravens valued Alohi Gilman. They traded a high-level pass rusher or the league views him. Odafe Owe was a high-level pass rusher based on how they paid him. And so I don't think Alohi Gilman's some sort of consolation prize for losing Trent McDuffie. I think they would have signed. I think Alohi Gilman would have been on the table if they re-signed Trent McDuffie. Like, so. I don't think signing Alohi Gilman had anything to do with the McDuffie or Watson decisions by Kansas City. I think this is a good move. I don't think this prevents them. I think on one side, it's a good signing that raises the floor, but I don't think this prevents them from like drafting a safety, either Caleb Downs at 9, Emmanuel McNeil Warren at like 29 or 40, or maybe someone in the middle rounds, because I don't think he has the upside to be really good like those other names I just listed, but
Right.
he does he's going to make sure the back middle of their secondary is not a disaster.
For sure. And like I said, like Brian Cook, I liked Brian Cook a lot. He was a smart player, sound player. $13 million for Brian Cook. I mean, I get why the Bengals did it because they need defensive help in any which way imaginable. I'm glad the Chiefs did not match that. That's a lot of money for a guy who's, like I said, a similar caliber player to Alohi Gilman. I like this move for the Chiefs. The Chiefs safety room with Gilman and Shamari Connor and Jaden Hicks, if Spags ever plays him, it's not the greatest safety room ever, but it's a safety room that's workable. It's very good. It's not a dire need for the Chiefs. So I like the move. I like Brett Veach doing that. I don't like him bringing back Mike Caliendo, but that's a different story for a different day. All right, we'll talk about some quarterback changes here. The New York Jets, another Collier X situation here. They trade for Geno Smith from the Las Vegas Raiders before the new league year starts. Geno was released by the Raiders, but that release was not official until Wednesday morning. So Tuesday afternoon, the Raiders trade for Geno. Of course, Geno was with the Jets. He was drafted there in the second round in 2013. He was there from 2013 to 2016, bounced around as a backup. Of course, he had that run in Seattle, had last year with the Raiders, was a disaster. So he gets a chance to kind of rebound a little bit with the Jets. And while, look, the Jets are not exactly the best place to be in the world, I do think it's a better infrastructure than what he had in Las Vegas. You have Garrett Wilson, you have Breece Hall, you have A.D. Mitchell, you have a far better offensive line. Yeah, Frank Reich, I don't know what to make of him at this point, but Chip Kelly literally didn't game plan for the Raiders last year. So I think by default, you have an upgrade in play calling. It doesn't move the needle. I still think the Jets are a bad team, but I do think Geno at least makes them watchable, which Justin Fields and Brady Cook were not last year. So what do you think about this one, Lucas?
I think this is exactly. This is weird. Okay. It's on one hand, I'm not gonna. I need to phrase this so it comes out right. I love this move for the Jets in the sense that it gives them an adult at quarterback, but it would still allow them to be bad enough to draft a legitimate franchise quarterback.
Right.
Geno Smith is not going to carry them to a 6-11 or 7-10 record, but he is going to make sure they're not a complete and total embarrassment at the quarterback position, like Brady Cook was. Justin Fields was better than Brady Cook, but like Brady Cook was the worst quarterback in football. That
Brady Cook should not be in the NFL. I mean, Brady Cook should not be in the NFL.
He should be a third stringer. Right. He should be a third stringer. So I like this move, like because it prevents them from being bad. But if Aaron Glenn is going to look his fans in the eye and say, we actually think, or maybe not just Aaron Glenn, but like Darren Muji or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Darren Muji. If they want to look their fans in the eye and say, oh, Geno Smith is going to be the answer, I think that's going to be very dishonest. But I highly doubt that Darren Muji genuinely believes Geno Smith is going to be the quarterback in 2027. I think he knows Geno Smith is a one-year placeholder. They're going to get their guy. Muji is going to be lobbying to Johnson, saying, "Hey, we don't think Geno Smith is that good, but we're going to make it so we're actually competitive. Maybe instead of losing by 10 every week, they maybe lose by 7. They maybe lose by 3-7 every week."
And I mean, they were losing by 40 every week down the stretch last year. Last 5 games,
like maybe lose by one score, like 1.5 scores every week. That's what this move is for. So I like them. I actually like this move for the Jets. They didn't pay anything. Like they pretty much they downgraded from a 6th round pick to a 7th round pick. That's basically nothing. And it's not like they paid him some big contract on top of it. It's like, I don't get why everyone was criticizing the Jets. Like who was going to be their quarterback if it wasn't Geno Smith? Like odds are it was not going to be not going to be anyone.
Tyler was not going there. Like who's like Carson Wentz, Andy Dalton, like those guys. I mean, come on, he was probably the best option. Yeah.
Maybe draft Garrett Nussmeier in like the fourth
Yeah.
round, and like, okay, you want to
Blah.
rely on a rookie, but like, I, no one actually. I think after they did not get the first overall pick, they lost out on that. They realized we're not getting our franchise quarterback this offseason, especially after Dante Moore left
Right.
or did not forgone the draft and went back to Oregon. They were kind of punting on the long-term quarterback market. I don't know if they were in on Malik Willis, but after they missed out on Willis, I think they kind of accepted we're not getting our franchise, we're not getting our quarterback of the future this offseason. Let's just get a placeholder and someone who's going to be comfortable dealing with the New York market because he started his career here in Geno Smith.
And look, the New York media, I think, was a lot tougher when Geno was there the first time. I think it's light now compared to what he used to be. Yeah, look, Geno, look, was bad last year. I don't think he's particularly good anymore, but he's an upgrade over what they had last season. And he'll at least throw the ball down the field. Garrett Wilson should still put up decent numbers, or good numbers with Geno throwing the ball because he knows how to get the ball to his top receivers. I understand this move, and it's kind of more of a okay, we'll go 5-12 this year. We'll be a normal bad team, and we'll get our franchise guy in 2027. All right, quick hitters here. Tua Tagovailoa signs a 1-year contract with the Atlanta Falcons. His run in Miami comes to an end. He will compete with fellow left-hander Michael Penix Jr. for the starting job. Look, I mean, Tua, it's a change of scenery for him. It's really the beginning of the end for Tua in Miami, I think, was that playoff game against the Chiefs and in the wild card round, that historically cold game where he just looked completely overmatched. And then the next year, he's hurt. He gets another concussion. He plays okay that season, but still struggles against top competition. And then last year, the bottom completely fell out. He was awful when he played. He was benched for the last 3 games. So the Dolphins are taking on a massive cap hit to release him, and he gets an opportunity to compete for Michael Penix Jr. to be the Falcons quarterback next year. Lucas, thoughts on this? Quick thoughts on this.
Not much. I mean,
Okay.
I think Tua is a perfectly fine backup. If Michael Penix sucks, Tua can play and it's like, I guess he's somewhat respectable. So, but other than that, and I guess they're both lefties, so they don't have to significantly change their offense. So I like it from that standpoint, but no one can actually unironically love this trade.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a trade; it was a free agent signing. But like,
this move.
Right. Now, I know what you meant. Like, look, it's an opportunity for Tua to revitalize his career. He had a couple years there where it looked like, okay, like this guy can play. Like their offense was really good when he was healthy. But the big knock on him was he struggled in inclement weather and he struggled against top competition. And last year he was one of the worst starters in football. So, look, we'll see how he does with Kevin Stefanski. I would start Michael Penix personally, but they obviously have some doubts about him if they're bringing in Tua. The Cardinals are running it back with Jacoby Brissett, like it predicted. They look perfectly committed to tanking for Arch. And then I'm going to go quickly through some other free agent signings. I'll just mention them. We don't need to talk about them at length. Alec Pierce re-signs with the Colts for $114 million. Wow. Like that is a lot. I'll have thoughts on that later. Odafe Owe, 4 years, $96 million to Washington. Wan'Dale Robinson, 4 years, $70 million to the Titans. He reunites with Brian Dable. Romeo Doubs from the Packers, 4 years, $68 million to the Patriots. John Franklin Myers, 3 years, $63 million to the Titans. David Edwards, 4 years, $61 million to the Saints. Alante Taylor, 3 years, $58 million to the Titans. Rashid Shaheed back in Seattle. Devin Lloyd, 3 years, $45 million to the Panthers. I think that's a good contract for Carolina. And then a contract that I did not like at all. Actually, I do like as a Chiefs fan. Bradley Chubb, 3 years, $43.5 million to the Bills. Quarterback moves, a lot of backup quarterback moves. Kenny Pickett signs with the Panthers to back up Bryce Young. Mitch Trubisky signs with the Titans to back up Cam Ward. Kyle Allen returns to Buffalo, where he was a few years ago, to back up Josh Allen. Teddy Bridgewater goes to the Lions to back up Jared Goff. And then trades, the biggest trade, I think, was Michael Pittman being traded to the Steelers to complement DK Metcalf and that receiver room. We'll talk more about that later. Lucas, do you have any parting thoughts? I just kind of rattled off some notable free agency contracts from this past week.
No, not really. I mean, I kind of maybe if I could take a few minutes to talk about the Travis Kelce contract.
Oh,
and
for sure.
I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about the specific, like, what is it like X's and O's. I'm going to talk about what they did. So if you don't know, the structure of the contract was released, and a lot of people were freaking out. It was like a 1 year, $12 million contract that could turn into $15 million with like incentives. But the Chiefs did something that was very unique, and I know very unique is not grammatically correct, but I'm going to
It's
say it
fine.
anyways. Yeah, but like they took advantage of a couple mechanisms. One was the 50% rule, in which if there's a contract that's structured in which 1 year of the contract has like significantly if there's a significant difference in like base salary from 1 year to the
Hmm.
other, the NFL like kind of like says, no, we're not going to let you do that to manipulate the cap. You're going to kind of have all that money that you thought was going to be in next year's books on this year's ones. So to explain it like this, Travis Kelsey's contract is for 1 year in like 13.35 million. That's what over the cap says. But the cap hits are structured like this: 2026, it's only $4.9 million, which I think that's like perfectly fine. Like if I think that's like I don't think you could have a big problem with that. But then as of right now, the void year for 2027, there is a void year. The Chiefs don't utilize void years, but they are, is going to be
Hmm.
4.9 million in 2027 and then 3.55 million in 2028. But I think if he retires next year, all of that money for 2027 and 2028 will all accelerate. So it'll be like $7.1 million in dead money, which I think that's fine. I mean, maybe if he has the $3 million in incentives, it's $10 million. But I think in the end, I think you're fine. I think every Chiefs fan would rather have $5 million immediately, $10 million next year, rather than all $15 million on a 1 year contract. And we all thought like the Chiefs would have to get creative to fit $12 million under the cap this year. Turns out
Hmm.
it wasn't going to be all this year. So credit to Brett Veach for doing something creative, something he normally doesn't do. The Chiefs are not a team that like to utilize void years. I'm not going to dive into that on this episode for a variety of reasons, but Brett Veach is using void years for Travis Kelsey's contract and pre-scheduling out void money in advance, which makes it easier to fit him under the cap this year and build a higher quality roster around Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey's final season in the league, most likely.
Yeah, look, I kind of felt this was coming when Travis didn't retire shortly after the season and made those comments on his podcast with his brother the week after the last game. It sounded like he was coming back. I'm not surprised they didn't want to go out with the way the Chiefs season went. Look, I thought last year was the final season. I think this year maybe I'll eventually be right, is the real final season, the last ride. And Lucas gave the whole contract details. So Travis Kelsey back for at least one more year with the Chiefs. Still a really good player. Had his best season since 2022 last year, despite playing in a pretty dysfunctional offense on a bad football team. Travis Kelsey can still play even at his older age at the tight end position. So, like I said, that's the first wave of free agency. I just went through some ones that Lucas and I didn't get to in depth. We talked about some more notable contracts. And he and I will be back next Saturday on the normal schedule to discuss anything that happens between now and then. I'm sure something will. The NFL something's always going on. So for Lucas, we will see you next week. Thank you very much.